Good day everyone. Today I'm gonna discuss what is perception. So let's start. Perception is the ability to capture, process, and actively make sense of the information that our senses receive. It is the cognitive process that makes it possible to interpret our surroundings with the stimuli that we receive throughout sensory organs. This important cognitive ability is essential to our daily lives because it makes it possible to understand our surroundings. It's possible to train and improve perception with cognitive stimulation. It is an active process and requires that we process information with both bottom-up and top-down processing, meaning that we are not only directed by the stimuli that we receive, but that we expect and anticipate certain stimuli that control perception. Perception is a complex process that allows us to connect with the surrounding world. Classically, it is divided in 5 senses. The first one is visual. Visual is the ability to see and interpret light information within the visible spectrum that arrives to our eyes. The area of the brain responsible for visual perception is the occipital lobe. The second one is hearing. Hearing is the ability to receive and interpret information that arrives to our ears by audible frequency waves through the air or another mean or sound. The brain part in charge of the basic stage of auditory perception is the temporal lobe. The third one is touch, somatory, sensory, or haptic. It is the capacity to interpret information of pressure and vibration received on the surface of our skin. The parietal lobe is the part of the brain responsible for the basic stages in haptic perception. The fourth one is smell or olfactory. It is the ability to interpret information of chemical substances dissolved in the air. Basic stages of olfactory perception are done by the olfactory bulb. The fifth and last is the taste. Taste is the ability to interpret information from chemical substances dissolved in saliva. The main brain areas in control of the basic stages are the primary taste areas G1, which is postcentral inferior gyrus, parietal ventral lobe, anterior insula, frontoparietal medial operculum, and secondary taste areas G2, which is caudolateral frontal orbital cortex and anterior cingulated cortex. Apart from classical 5 senses today, we are aware that there are other types of perception. Here's the example. The first is spatial. It is the ability to be aware of your relationships with the environment around you and with yourself. It is related to the haptic and kinesthetic perception. Second is form. The ability to retrieve information about the limits and aspects of an entity through the outline and contrast. It is related to visual and haptic perception. The third is vestibular, the capacity to interpret gravity's force according to the relative position of our head and the floor. It helps maintain balance and control our posture. It's related to auditory perception. The fourth is thermoception or thermal, the ability to interpret temperature on the surface of our skin. It is related to the haptic perception. The next is nociception, the capacity to interpret very high or very low temperature stimuli, as well as the presence of harmful chemical or high pressure stimuli. It is related to the haptic and thermoception. The next is itching, the ability to interpret harmful stimuli on our skin that causes scratching. It's related to haptic perception. The next is proprioception, the ability to interpret information about the position and state of our muscles and tendons, which allows us to be aware of our posture. and in what area in each part of our body it is related to the vestibular or haptic perception. The next is interoceptive, the capacity to interpret the sensations that indicate the state of our internal organs. The next is the sense of time, the ability to interpret changes in stimuli and be able to organize them in time. The next is kinesthetic, the ability to interpret information about movement and velocity of our surroundings in our body. It is related to visual, spatial, time, haptic. Interoceptive, proprioception, and vestibular perception. The next is chemosensory, the ability to interpret chemical substances dissolved in saliva that translate into strong tastes. It is related to taste perception, but the two use different structures. The next and last is magnetoreception or magnetoception, the capacity to interpret information from magnetic fields. It is more developed in animals like pigeons. However, it has discovered that humans also have magnetic material in ethmoid, making it possible for humans to have magnetoception. Perception is not a single process that happens spontaneously. Instead, it is a series of phases that takes place in order for the correct appreciation of stimuli to occur. For example, to perceive visual information, it's not enough for light to reflect off an object, and this is stimulating our retinal receptor cells for them to send this information to the correct brain areas. For it to happen, all of that is necessary. However, it is an active process where we have to select, organize, and interpret the information sent to the brain. So here is the phases of perception. The first one is the selection. The number of stimuli we are exposed daily exceeds our capacity. For this reason, we need to filter and choose the information we want to perceive. Selection is done through our attention, experiences, necessities, and preferences. The second process or phase is organization. Once we know that what to perceive, we need to gather the stimuli in groups in order to give them meaning. Perception that there is synergy, since it is an overall recognition of what is perceived, and it can't be reduced to separate the stimuli's characteristics. According to Gestalt principles, stimuli organization is not random, but instead it follows a specific criteria. Third and last phase is interpretation. When we have organized all the selected stimuli, we then proceed to give them meaning, completing the perception process. The interpretation process is regulated by our experience and expectations. The next part of our discussion is about disorders regarding perception. The most common perception disorder is agnosia. This disorder entails a difficulty in directing and controlling perception, as well as behavior in general. There are two types: perceptive visual agnosia and associated visual agnosia. It's difficult to understand through these disorders since even though they can see, for them it is similar sensation to being blind. There are also more specific disorders such as akenitopsia, inability to see movement; acrotopsia, inability to see colors or color blindness; prosopagnosia, inability to recognize familiar faces; auditive agnosia, inability to recognize an object by sound. And in case of verbal information, person with agnosia wouldn't be able to recognize the language speech. A Anosmia, inability to recognize or reproduce physical tones or rhythms. These disorders are produced by brain damage such as ictus, brain trauma,